Chapter 15. Bring it up on the main view screen, Zavis commanded, his deep voice carrying across the bridge. The massive hololith display flickered to life, casting green-tinged illumination across the bridge crew's faces. The scene materialized before them, two vessels locked together in the void. One was clearly a merchant vessel, its burgundy hull bearing the markings of the Merchant Fleet Guild. Even through the long-range auguries, the damage was evident. Great rents torn in its hull plating, its port engine clusters dark and lifeless. The second vessel, that was more curious. It had clamped itself to the merchant ship's starboard docking collar, but its configuration wasn't matching any known patterns in their ship's cogitators. "Life signs?" Zavis asked, his red eyes reflecting the ghostly green light of the display. Kaney's fingers danced across her station. "Faint readings from the merchant vessel, sir. The attached ship is giving strange returns. The machine spirits are having trouble getting clear readings." First Officer Dorn stepped forward, his augmetic eye whirring as it focused on the display. "That's not a standard rescue configuration, sir. The way they're docked." He left the implication hanging in the air. "Pirates," Zavis said, what might have been a smile touching his lips. "Or something worse. Helm, plot an intercept course. Let's see what manner of predator we've caught stalking the Emperor's shipping lanes." He hololith crackled to life, bathing the bridge in its ethereal green glow. Zavis leaned forward in his command throne, ignoring the protest from his bruised torso. The sound of the radar's steady beep continued its rhythm, a constant reminder of the situation unfolding before them. Beep, beep, beep. Something about this didn't sit right in his gut. Years of void warfare had taught him to trust that instinct. His red eyes narrowed as he studied the image, noting how the second vessel seemed to huddle against the merchant ship like a parasite rather than a rescuer. "Enhancement, quarter section Delta 7, he commanded, watching as the augury arrays zoomed in on the connection point between the two ships. The beeping changed pitch slightly as the sensors adjusted their focus, its tone rising just enough to make several bridge crew members glance nervously at their stations. Zavis drummed his obsidian fingers once on his throne's armrest, a habit from his days as a scout that he'd never quite shaken. The merchant vessel's emergency running lights were still functional, blinking their desperate pattern into the void. But why hadn't they sent out a distress signal? The thought nagged at him like an ill-fitted piece of armor. The radar's beep suddenly doubled, two distinct tones now, as the auguries picked up movement from the second vessel. "Sir," Ensign Reth called out, his voice tight, "I'm detecting power spikes from the unknown ship. They may have spotted us." The bridge's lighting seemed to dim as another series of information runes cascaded across the tactical display. The steady beeping continued, but now it carried an almost anxious tone as the ancient machine spirits processed the incoming data. "Imperial codes detected," announced Kaney, her voice carrying a note of confusion. The brass keys beneath her fingers clinked as she input various authentication protocols. "But sir, these codes, they're old, several cycles out of date. The cogitators are having trouble matching them to any current registry." Beep, beep, beep. Zavis felt the weight of his centuries of service press upon him. Old codes could mean many things in the Imperium, and few of them were good. A derelict ship awakened from some forgotten patrol route. A vessel lost in the warp, finally emerging centuries later. Or something more sinister. Pirates using stolen codes, or worse. The radar's rhythmic sound was joined by the soft whir of Dorn's augmetic eye as it cycled through various enhancement modes. "Still too far for visual confirmation, Captain. At this range, we can't even determine the vessel class." "Those codes," Zavis muttered, more to himself than the crew, his deep salamander voice resonating with thought. "When was the last time they were in active use?" The sound of brass keys clicking grew more intense as Caney consulted the ancient databases. Caney's servitors whirred and clicked as they interfaced with the ship's ancient data cores, the sound mixing with the constant beep, beep, beep of the radar. The temperature on the bridge seemed to drop a few degrees as her face paled at what she found. "Sir," she swallowed hard, making the sign of the Aquila. "These codes, they're from the dark age of technology, pre-heresy at the very least. The machine spirits can only identify fragments of the authentication pattern." The radar's beeping suddenly took on a scratchy, distorted quality, as if the very age of what they were detecting was interfering with their systems. Several data screens flickered, ancient machine spirits struggling with information they were never designed to process. Zavas felt the muscles in his jaw tighten. As a salamander, he knew well the legends of ancient vessels, stories passed down in the fires of Nocturne. Ships that should have died millennia ago, still drifting through the void with purposes long forgotten. "Multiple signature ghosts now," Ensign Reth reported, adjusting his dials as the beeping continued its irregular pattern. "The old codes they're causing interference with our auguries, sir. Can't get a clean read anymore." First Officer Dorn's augmetic eye had stopped its whirring completely, frozen in what appeared to be an attempt to process the contradictory data. The deep thrum of the ship's engines seemed to grow louder in the sudden silence as Zavis rose from his command throne, masking any sign of his lingering injuries. First Officer Dorn, Officer Caney, Lieutenant Commander Voss. His red eyes swept over his senior staff. "My office, now." He turned to his bridge crew. "Maintain current distance. Do not attempt to hail them. Ensign Reth, keep those auguries singing, even if they protest. I want to know the moment anything changes." The radar's irregular beep, beep, beep followed them as they filed into the captain's office, a Spartanly furnished chamber just off the bridge. The walls were decorated with a single banner bearing the salamander's insignia, and a small brazier burned in one corner, a touch of Nocturne's traditions in the void of space. The massive obsidian desk, sized for Zavis's Astartes frame, dominated the room. As his officers arranged themselves before it, the filtered sounds of the bridge's activities came through the armored walls like distant whispers. "Options," Zavis said simply, his charcoal features illuminated by the brazier's glow. "Speak freely." "With respect, Captain," Caney began, her fingers absently tracing the cog pattern on her robes. "Calling for backup would be prudent. A vessel that old—" She shook her head. "The Mechanicus would want to know." "The nearest battle group is 3 weeks away at best," Dorn cut in, his augmetic eye glowing faintly in the dim office. "And if we alert them, every rogue trader and salvage crew in the sector will pick up the signal. We'd have a feeding frenzy on our hands." Lieutenant Commander Voss, who had remained characteristically quiet until now, cleared his throat. "There's also the merchant vessel to consider, sir, if there are survivors. The unspoken implications of leaving Imperial citizens at the mercy of an unknown vessel hung in the air." Zavis leaned back in his chair, the ancient wood creaking slightly under his weight. A Dark Age vessel. It was the kind of discovery that could make or break careers, start wars, or change the balance of power in the sector. And it was sitting right in front of them, wrapped around a merchant ship like a serpent around its prey. "The Commissar will need to be informed," Dorn added quietly, causing a subtle shift in the room's atmosphere. Chapter 16. The Commissar. Zavis rumbled, recalling their conversation from just the night before. "After last night's discussion, I believe he'll take a particular interest in this situation." His red eyes reflected the brazier's flames as he considered the implications. "There's something else, sir," Caney interjected, pulling out a data slate. "The merchant vessel's registration. I've been running deeper scans and—" She paused, her face illuminated by the slate's green glow. It's listed as having made port at Hydrafour 3 weeks ago. Impossible, Voss said sharply. Hydrafour's been under quarantine for months. No vessels in or out. The revelation settled over the room like a heavy shroud. Fake registry papers were common enough among pirates, but this level of documentation would require access to Imperial databases. Dorn's augmetic eye whirred as he processed this new information. So we have an ancient vessel, using Dark Age codes, attached to a merchant ship with impossible papers. He shook his head. This has all the markings of a trap, sir. Or something worse, Zavis said, rising from his chair to stand before the brazier. The flames cast his massive shadow across the office walls. The question isn't just what we're looking at, but what it's doing here, now. The door's hydraulic hiss announced the commissar's arrival, his crisp uniform a stark contrast to the tension in the room. After his precise salute, he moved with deliberate steps to join the gathering, his presence somehow making the spacious office feel smaller. Pirates and smugglers, nothing more, he stated with cold certainty, his words cutting through the speculation like a power sword. One predator caught by another. His eyes, sharp as lasfire, met Zavis's burning red gaze. I know your kind, Captain. The Salamander's reputation for valuing human life is admirable, but trust me when I say this. Let them sort it out. No need to waste resources on those who won't appreciate it. Zavis's massive frame stiffened slightly, the muscles in his charcoal neck tensing. Last night's conversation, their shared understanding, seemed suddenly distant in light of this cold pragmatism. You seem very certain of their nature, Commissar, he responded, his deep voice carefully neutral despite the challenge in his words. Because I've seen this before, the Commissar replied, moving to stand beside the brazier. Its light cast harsh shadows across his face. The old codes are a common enough trick among the more resourceful pirate clans. They know our more modern auger arrays sometimes glitch trying to process them. Creates confusion, doubt, exactly what we're experiencing now. And the Hydrafour registration, Caney asked, her mechanicus implants whirring softly. The Commissar's thin smile held no warmth. Precisely my point. What's more likely that we've stumbled upon some mysterious Dark Age vessel with impossible papers, or that we're watching two groups of criminals destroying each other? He turned to face Zavis directly. Tell me, Captain, how many times have you seen mysterious vessels turn out to be nothing more than elaborate deceptions? Zavis moved his massive frame away from the brazier, its flames reflecting in his red eyes. Often enough, he admitted, but we still have a duty to— To what? The Commissar interrupted, though not unkindly. To risk your ship, your crew, for those who've already chosen to operate outside Imperial law. The Emperor protects Captain, but he expects us to exercise judgment in how we extend that protection. The other officers shifted uneasily at the Commissar's words. Caney clutched her data slate closer to her chest, the clicking of her augmetics betraying her discomfort. Dorn's augmetic eye whirred rapidly, a telltale sign of his agitation, while Voss seemed to be trying to physically shrink into the shadows of the office. You make valid points, Commissar, Zavis rumbled, his voice carrying the heat of Nocturne's depths. But something about this situation doesn't align with typical pirate behavior. Pirates don't usually— A sudden burst of static from Caney's data slate interrupted him. She fumbled with it, her usual mechanical precision forgotten in her nervousness. Sir, new readings from the merchant vessel. We're picking up— She paused, double-checking the data. We're detecting a very faint signal. It's an inquisitorial beacon. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Even the Commissar's rigid posture showed a slight crack in its certainty. Well, First Officer Dorn said into the heavy silence, his voice barely above a whisper. That changes things. The silence in the office grew thick enough to cut with a chain sword. The brazier's flames seemed to flicker more intensely, casting dancing shadows across the assembled officers' faces. "An inquisitorial beacon," the commissar repeated slowly, his previous certainty evaporating like water on hot steel. "Active or residual?" Caney's fingers trembled slightly as they moved across her data slate. "Active, sir. Very weak, but pulsing. It's using—" She paled visibly. "It's using Ordo Xenos emergency protocols." Zavis's massive frame straightened, his red eyes focusing on the commissar with new intensity. "Still think we should let them sort it out, commissar?" Voss cleared his throat nervously. "If the Inquisition is involved, we're obligated to investigate. The penalties for ignoring an inquisitorial beacon—" He left the sentence unfinished, but everyone in the room knew the implications. Dorn's augmetic eye had stopped its anxious whirring, frozen in place as if the very machinery was afraid to make a sound. "Captain," he said carefully, "if we intervene, we need to consider that either vessel could be the Inquisition's, or neither. This could be a trap using salvaged inquisitorial equipment. Or," Zavis rumbled, "we could be watching a genuine Inquisitor in need of aid, while we stand here debating semantics." "The Inquisition," the commissar said, and for the first time since Zavis had known him, there was a trace of uncertainty in his voice. "In all my years of service, I've never actually encountered one, only stories." He straightened his already rigid posture, as if trying to hide his discomfort. "Stories," he continued, almost to himself, "of entire worlds being quarantined on their word alone, of Space Marine chapters being declared excommunicate, of Lord Generals vanishing without trace after questioning their authority." His hand unconsciously moved to adjust his collar. Zavis's red eyes studied the commissar, seeing this crack in his usual ironclad certainty. Even a hardened commissar, it seemed, could be rattled by the prospect of dealing with the Emperor's most mysterious servants. "I once saw an Inquisitor in Segmentum Solar," Voss offered quietly. "She had a retinue of beings I can't even describe. Some weren't even—" He trailed off, making the sign of the Aquila. The radar's persistent beeping seemed to grow louder in the tense silence that followed, a reminder that while they debated, the situation outside continued to unfold. "Well," Zavis rumbled, his charcoal features set in grim determination, "we can't stand here theorizing while an Inquisitor might be in danger. Commissar, your caution is noted, but—" "Captain!" Caney's voice cut through the office Vox link, sharp with urgency. The constant radar beeping had changed its pattern. "The vessels, they're moving. The unknown ship it's pulling away from the merchant vessel. Multiple drive signatures activating." Dorn's augmetic eye flashed as he accessed the bridge feed. "Energy spikes detected. Their weapons are powering up, sir." The commissar's face hardened back into its mask of authority, personal uncertainties forgotten in the face of immediate action. "So much for theoretical discussion," he said dryly. Zavis was already moving toward the door, his massive frame casting long shadows in the brazier's light. "Dorn, sound battle stations. Caney, I want every scrap of data those auguries can give us about that ship's capabilities. Voss, begin plotting intercept vectors." He paused at the threshold, turning his burning red eyes back to the assembled officers. "And someone wake up our gun crews. I have a feeling we're about to need them." The deep, resonant boom of the battle station's klaxon echoed through the ship's corridors. Red lumens flashed in sequence along the walls, casting crimson shadows as crew members rushed to their stations. The sound of armored boots on metal decking created a thunderous rhythm throughout the vessel. Zavis strode onto the bridge, his massive form moving with purpose despite his still tender injuries. The radar's urgent beeping now competed with dozens of other warning sounds and signals as the bridge came alive with combat energy. "Status," his voice boomed over the controlled chaos. "Unknown vessel's energy signature climbing rapidly. Caney reported, her fingers dancing across her station's brass keys. "Their void shields are powering up. Ancient patterns, sir. The machine spirits can barely recognize the configurations." "Multiple weapon ports opening," Voss called out, his voice tight. "But these readings... Sir, some of these weapon signatures don't match anything in our combat libraries." The main hololith crackled with static as it struggled to maintain a clear image of the separating vessels. The merchant ship hung lifeless in space while the mysterious vessel pulled away with surprising grace for its apparent age. Chapter 17. All ships, battle formations. Zavas's deep voice carried across the fleet, vox from aboard Emperor's Wrath. The bridge's red warning lights reflected off his obsidian skin as he watched his small but potent fleet move with practiced precision. The massive form of the Charging Bull took the lead position, Chapter Master Volix's flagship cutting an imposing silhouette against the void. Her ancient hull bristled with weapons, gun ports cycling open as void shields hummed to full power. Beside her, Emperor's Wrath moved in perfect synchronization, falling into attack formation with the precision of millennia of void warfare. Behind them, the Sword of Dawn took up its rearward position. Though still formidable, its primary role as the fleet's supply vessel meant it carried fewer weapons than its sister ships. Its precious cargo of food stores and supplies made it too valuable to risk in the front lines. "Fleet acknowledgements received, Captain," Dorn reported, his augmetic eye tracking the formation data. "The chapter master signals ready." From his bridge aboard Emperor's Wrath, Zavas could feel the tension mounting as the distance closed. He knew Chapter Master Volix would be watching the same tactical displays aboard the Charging Bull, his centuries of experience evaluating their approach. The massive real space breach flashed with blue-white energy as the three battle barges dropped out of the void like leviathans breaching the surface of an ocean. The transition sent vibrations through Emperor's Wrath's deck, plating that Zavas could feel through his command throne. "All ships successfully translated to real space," Caney reported, the brass keys of her station clicking rapidly. "Void shields holding stable across the fleet." The radar's beeping grew more insistent now, the unknown vessel no longer a mere ghost on their sensors, but a rapidly solidifying presence. The main hololith's image began to sharpen, static clearing to reveal. "Emperor, protect us," Voss whispered, making the sign of the Aquila. Through the bridge viewport, they could now make out the vessel's actual form. Its hull was ancient ceramite and adamantium, but the design was like nothing in their records. Flowing lines and graceful arches that seemed to defy void ship construction principles, mixed with brutal weapon ports and strange pulsing energy nodes. "Chapter Master signals to hold position," Dorn announced, his augmetic eye whirring as it processed the tactical feed. He's ordering gun crews to stand by but not to target. Sir, he's seeing something we're not." "Magnification, maximum," Zavas commanded, his red eyes narrowing at the vessel before them. The hololith enhanced the image, revealing more details that made even his ancient warrior's blood run cold. "Imperial architecture," he noted aloud, "but those lines, that's not human engineering, at least not entirely." The ship seemed to shimmer slightly, as if it wasn't quite properly anchored in real space. A priority Vox channel crackled to life, Chapter Master Volix's deep voice filling the bridge. "Captain Zavis, are you seeing this? Those energy signatures, they match the old texts, the ones from the founding." Before Zavas could respond, Caney's voice cut through the tension. "Sir, the merchant vessel, it's powering up. But these readings, by the Omnissiah," her Mechanicus implants were whirring in agitation. "The power source, it's similar to the unknown vessel." The radar's steady beeping suddenly split into a cacophony of competing tones as both vessels began moving in perfect synchronization, their movements too precise to be coincidence. It was never in distress, Zavis realized aloud. They weren't attacking each other. They were docking, the commissar finished grimly. We've walked into something far older than pirates, haven't we? The tech marine, his red robes swirling with his frantic movements, hunched over his station. His augmetic fingers flew across ancient dials and brass switches, servos whining with the speed of his adjustments. The standard Vox chatter and radar beeping filled the bridge, but underneath it all, "There," he muttered, his cybernetic eye glowing brighter with concentration. "Just at the edge of—" He adjusted another dial, fingers dancing across frequency modulators. The sound was like a whisper beneath the static, almost subliminal. Up and down the frequencies he searched, mechanical tendrils interfacing directly with his console's machine spirit. "Brothers, I need silence," he called out suddenly, his mechanically enhanced voice cutting through the bridge chatter. Even Captain Zavis turned to look as the tech marine's augmetics hummed with effort. There, in the space between frequencies, in the valleys between normal Vox channels, something was pulsing. Something was singing. "Captain," the tech marine's voice had taken on an odd tone, his augmetics whirring in agitation. There's something else in the void with us. Something broadcasting on frequencies I've never—" His mechadendrites twisted anxiously around his station's brass fixtures. He adjusted another dial, and a sound began to filter through the bridge's Vox speakers. It was barely perceptible at first, like the ghost of a melody played too far away to properly hear. Not quite machine, not quite organic. It seemed to exist in the spaces between normal sound. "Can you clean it up?" Zavis demanded, his red eyes fixed on the tech marine's increasingly erratic movements. "Trying, my lord, but it's like it doesn't want to be found, like it's hiding between the frequencies we use. I've never seen patterns like—" His voice trailed off as he made another adjustment. The radar's steady beeping suddenly seemed to harmonize with the strange sound for a moment, creating a discord that made several crew members wince. The tech marine's augmetics were now cycling through colors, reflecting his growing agitation as he pursued the elusive signal. The veteran brother's ancient power armor whirred softly as he moved, ceramite gauntlets handling the delicate headset with practiced care. The bridge crew watched in tense silence as he stood, motionless, listening. His helm's red eye lenses seemed to dim slightly as he focused entirely on the sound. For a long moment, only the radar's steady beeping and the ship's background hum broke the silence. Then, slowly, the veteran's posture changed. It was subtle, the kind of shift only those who had fought alongside him for centuries would notice. His grip on the command rail tightened enough to leave impressions in the metal. "Brother Captain," he said finally, his Vox-enhanced voice carrying an edge that made even Zavis's red eyes narrow with concern. "I know this sound. I heard it once, 300 years ago during the Carthage Crusade." He turned his helm toward the mysterious vessels on the view screen, still holding the headset to his armor. "We lost 2 ships that day, and I watched a third. Taken over by the 1,000 Suns," the veteran finished, each word heavy with the weight of remembered horror. His armor's servo motors whined as his grip tightened further on the command rail. 1,000 Suns? Out here? Zavis's deep voice rumbled with disbelief, his red eyes flaring brighter in the bridge's dim light. This far from their known hunting grounds. The charcoal skin around his eyes creased as he scowled at the implications. The mysterious signal continued to weave through the static, and now that they knew what to listen for, there was something undeniably sorcerous about its pattern. The tech marine made a warding gesture with his mechadendrites, his augmetics clicking rapidly in agitation. "The codes," the commissar said suddenly, his earlier confidence completely evaporated. "Dark Age signatures, pre-heresy patterns. Of course, they would know them, wouldn't they? They were there." Zavis rose from his command throne, his massive frame casting long shadows in the bridge's red battle lighting. "If the 1,000 Suns are involved, that's no ordinary inquisitorial beacon we detected. This entire scenario, he paused, looking at the synchronized movements of the two vessels on their screens. It's a web, and we just walked into it. Chapter Master Volux, Priority Channel, Zavas commanded, his voice carrying the urgency but not the fear of their discovery. As the Vox channel crackled open, he could hear the background sounds of the charging bull's bridge. My lord, we have confirmation. The signal our tech marine intercepted. It's 1,000 suns. The silence that followed seemed to stretch for an eternity. Even the radar's constant beeping felt muted, as if the very machines understood the gravity of this revelation. 1,000 suns. Vollux's voice came back, deep and contemplative. Brother Captain Kairos recognized their song? Yes, my lord, from the Carthage Crusade. I remember. 2 simple words, but they carried the weight of centuries. The merchant vessel's distress, a trap within a trap. Clever, even for them. A pause, then. All ships, prepare cyclonic torpedoes. If they want to play with ancient technology, let's show them some of our own. The bridge crew of Emperor's Wrath stiffened at the order. Cyclonic torpedoes were rarely used. Their destructive power was deemed excessive for most engagements. But against the sorcery of the 1,000 suns, their voice trailing off. Approaching vessel, Zavis's deep voice carried across the void. Identify yourself or be fired upon. His red eyes remained fixed on the main view screen, watching for any sign of movement from the mysterious ship. The silence that followed seemed to press against their ears, broken only by the steady beep, beep of the radar. Then, a shriek of feedback tore through the bridge's Vox speakers, causing several crew members to flinch. The sound twisted and writhed like something alive, until it resolved into a voice that seemed to echo from somewhere far deeper than mere space.
Your time has come.
The voice pronounced each word with unnatural precision.
Sons of Vulcan.
The pauses between words felt wrong, as if time itself was being stretched.
Time to meet your master in the afterlife.
Zavis's charcoal features hardened, but before he could respond, Caney called out from her station, "Sir!" Energy spikes across both vessels. Their weapon systems are... The rest of her words were drowned out by the wail of proximity alarms. Both vessels still beyond weapons range, reported Voss, his hands steady on the tactical display despite the tension. But their acceleration is impossible. They're covering void distance faster than their drives should allow. The radar's beeping had increased in tempo, matching the rapidly closing distance. On the main hololith, the mysterious vessels seemed to shimmer and twist, as if the very fabric of space was distorting around them. Time to weapons range, Zavas demanded, his massive frame leaning forward in the command throne. 40 seconds, sir, Voss responded. But these readings, their speed keeps increasing. The machine spirits can barely track their trajectory. Chapter Master signals all ships to hold position, Dorn reported, his augmetic eye whirring frantically. Weapons primed, but waiting for his command. The unnatural voice came again across the Vox, each word spaced with that same deliberate, unsettling rhythm.
Your weapons cannot harm what you cannot touch.
All ships, Chapter Master Vollux's voice boomed across the fleet Vox. Weapons free the moment they cross the line. The tension on Emperor's Wrath's bridge was palpable as they watched the tactical displays. The radar's beeping had become almost frantic now, tracking the impossibly fast approach of the enemy vessels. 30 seconds to weapons range, Voss called out, his fingers dancing across targeting runes. The voice came again, each pause now filled with what sounded like distant, mocking laughter.
29. 28.
They're counting down with us, the commissar muttered, his face pale. Multiple energy signatures, Caney reported, her mechanicus implants whirring in distress. Their weapon ports are, sir, they're configurations I've never seen before. 15 seconds, Voss announced. Zavis's red eyes blazed as he watched the distance close. His massive hands gripped the arms of his command throne. Gun crews, stand ready. The moment Chapter Master gives the word. 10 seconds. The mysterious vessel's form seemed to ripple and twist in the void, as if reality itself was struggling to contain them. Fire! Chapter Master Vorlux's command thundered across the Vox, and the void erupted with light. The charging bull and Emperor's Wrath unleashed their broadsides simultaneously, massive batteries of weapons lighting up space. Lance beams cut brilliant lines through the darkness, while salvos of torpedoes streaked toward their targets. The synchronized barrage was enough firepower to cripple a small fleet. The impacts against the enemy vessel's shields created a spectacular display, but not the one they expected. Instead of the typical blue-white flare of void shields under impact, the energy weapons seemed to twist as they struck, their beams bending at impossible angles. The torpedoes exploded in brilliant flowers of plasma, but the detonations warped and stretched like images in a broken mirror. Direct hits confirmed, but Caney's voice faltered as she read her displays. Sir, they're shields. They're not standard void shields. The energy patterns are all wrong. Readings suggest minimal damage. The unsettling voice returned, somehow carrying amusement in its measured pace.
Is that all you brought to face us?
Second salvo incoming, Voss announced as the massive guns cycled for another barrage. Multiple impacts confirmed, Voss called out as the second wave of fire slammed into the enemy vessels. Lance beams and torpedo explosions lit up the void once again, but with the same disturbing distortion effects. Energy readings make no sense, the tech marine reported, his mechadendrites writhing in agitation. The machine spirits cannot comprehend the shield patterns. It's as if reality itself is protecting them. Suddenly, the enemy vessel's synchronized movements changed. They began to move in patterns that seemed to defy normal void combat logic, their hulls leaving strange afterimages in their wake. Incoming! Caney's warning barely preceded the enemy's response. Beams of impossible colors lanced out from the mysterious ships, their trajectories bending and twisting through space. Where they struck Emperor's Wrath's void shields, the energy didn't dissipate normally. Instead, it seemed to seep through, like water through cloth. Void shields at 60% and falling, Dorn reported, his augmetic eye struggling to track the attack patterns. But the damage, it's not registering properly in our systems. Something else is happening. The laughter-filled voice came again.
Your technology is nothing compared to our sorcery.
Cobra's swift vengeance and Emperor's spite execute pattern Helios. Chapter Master Vorlux's command cut through the chaos. The two smaller destroyers, which had been sheltering in the battle barge's shadow, burst forth with surprising agility for Imperial vessels. Streams of weapon fire continued to twist and distort between the larger ships as the Cobras executed their flanking maneuver, their engines burning bright against the void. Their smaller profiles and exceptional speed made them ideal for the tactic. The enemy vessels are tracking the Cobras, Caney reported, her augmetics clicking rapidly. Their weapon systems are dividing their attention. The unsettling voice seemed to hold genuine amusement now.
Send your little ones to die first. How brave.
But even as the voice mocked, the Cobra's maneuver was having an effect. The enemy's impossible weapons couldn't target everything at once. Their reality-bending beams now split between 4 targets instead of 2. Swift Vengeance reports successful hits on their aft sections, Dorn announced. Minimal damage, but... Wait. His augmetic eye flared suddenly. Sir, they're detecting something different about their port weapons. The distortion effects aren't as strong there. Enemy vessel firing again, Caney called out as space itself lit up with weapons fire. Multiple signatures, Inferno cannons, and Emperor protect us. They've modified their ectoplasma batteries with some kind of sorcerous enhancement. The endless darkness around them blazed as streams of warp-touched inferno bolts cut through the stars, leaving trails of blue-purple flame that lingered in the vacuum. The ectoplasma shots spiraled in impossible patterns, their normally green energy corrupted to an otherworldly shade that hurt to look at. Swift Vengeance taking evasive action, Voss reported, watching the smaller ship roll desperately through space to avoid the Inferno barrage. But those modified weapons, they're tracking like they have minds of their own. Zavas gripped his command throne as another volley of corrupted ectoplasma slammed into Emperor's Wrath's shields. The impact sent ripples of distorted energy cascading across the hull, and for a moment the bridge crew could hear whispers in their minds. Those are Thousand Sons weapon loadouts, the veteran brother confirmed grimly. But they've corrupted the machine spirits, bound them with... He paused, reluctant to speak of such things. With warp entities.
Pattern recognized,
Came the mocking voice.
You faced us before. How fortunate. Now witness our improvements.
Direct hit on Swift Vengeance, Caney cried out as the corrupted ectoplasma struck true. The impact detonated in a massive explosion that tore through the destroyer's starboard hull, ripping a massive breach in its structure. Zavas's red eyes widened in horror as he watched the catastrophic damage unfold. Through the bridge viewport, he could see the terrible scene with crystal clarity. Crew members being violently pulled into the void of space by the explosive decompression. Their bodies tumbled helplessly into the infinite darkness, arms and legs flailing against the merciless vacuum. Some were still firing their weapons in defiance, even as the cold void claimed them. Swift Vengeance reports critical hull breach. Dorn's voice was tight with controlled anger. They've lost entire sections of their starboard decks, life support failing in multiple compartments. The mocking voice came again.
Watch them float like little moths in the dark.
Get rescue craft out there now, Zavas roared, his massive frame rising from the command throne in fury. And keep firing. Don't let those bastards have a moment's respite. Get rescue craft out there, Zavas began to roar, but then stopped himself mid-command. His red eyes fixed on the drifting forms of his battle brothers, his charcoal features hardening with the weight of command. Belay that order, Sergeant, he said, each word heavy with restrained emotion. The bridge crew turned to look at their captain, shock evident in their faces. The Tech Marines' mechadendrites went still. But, sir, the sergeant began, our brothers are already dead, Zavis finished grimly. We cannot waste resources or expose more crew to enemy fire, not against an opponent like this. His massive hands gripped the command throne's arms, tight enough to leave impressions in the metal. The Emperor knows their sacrifice. We honor them by finishing this fight. Through the viewport, they could still see the bodies drifting in the star-lit darkness, growing smaller and smaller against the infinite black. The enemy's voice came again.
Such cold calculations. Captain, perhaps you understand more than most.